Massena is set to help businesses improve their properties. Again, round two of a certain kind of funding opened up recently in the village. Here's 7 News reporter Sean Brinda.
Offering local businesses $10,000 to $50,000 in grant money, Massena hopes to help renovate local businesses. The grants are part of the state funding the village won in 2021, part of a $10 million prize. Village Administrator Monique Chatlin says most of the money will be done through the core of the community fund, where the first round of funding helped 8 projects. The second round of funding opened November 6th. Businesses which already secured funding can apply again to continue renovating their property.
I love assisting anyone, but especially the local businesses. That's very important. They've made an investment in our downtown, an investment in our community, and I want to help them succeed in any way I can.
One of the projects that is benefiting from the core of the community funding is the Shine Theater, which is across the street from the Massena Town Hall. The first round of the money for the theater will renovate the facade and a marquee will be put up.
It is such an opportunity to be able to bridge that gap between, renovating the front of your building or buying that piece of equipment that you just can't, afford. This helps them get those goals.
Lasham hopes that in a few years, the Shine Theater will be ready to operate again, and there will be other success stories generated from this grant money. Sean Brinda, 7 News.